The hangar door hissed open at 05:57. Claire Donovan stepped through without a word, boots striking concrete with a precision that matched the timestamp in her head. No clipboard, no gear bag, just a stainless steel mug clutched in her left hand and eyes that scanned without blinking. Inside, the usual noise had thinned. The scuffed floors were still marked with last night's chalk lines. Someone had swept, but only halfway. Two crew chiefs stood near a tool cart, speaking in low tones. Their voices clipped off mid-sentence when they saw her. She didn't pause. Claire walked past rows of T-6 Texan II aircraft lined up in two files. White paint, navy trim, the usual. She caught the faint oil smell of fresh torque application. Someone had been tightening bolts recently. Too recently. Her eyes passed over tail numbers. 3 of them flagged something in her memory, but she said nothing. She reached Bay 3. The aircraft sat alone. Number 652. New composite panels. Too clean. Main gear tires showing less wear than they should have for its log time. Someone had detailed it overnight. Not procedure, just performance. She sipped coffee. No expression. Across the floor, a lieutenant made eye contact, then looked away. 2 airmen near the avionics bench quickly shifted their focus to a panel that didn't need attention. She noticed, didn't acknowledge it. Claire moved toward the maintenance board posted near the hangar's east wall, pages clipped in neat rows. She reached for the binder without looking. Thumbed through the last inspection for 652. Torque check signed off in 17 minutes. Control linkage test 1 entry. No redundancy. A note about an electronic systems check marked complete with no attached data file. She didn't sigh. Just flipped the page back and closed the binder. The air was warmer than it should have been for that hour. Hangar fans off. That wasn't an oversight. It was a silence. Mechanical systems mirrored the human ones. At 06:03, the door behind her opened again. Chief Master Sergeant Harlan stepped in. He crossed the floor without greeting, handed her a manila folder. Test flight schedule. Aircraft 652 assigned. Blocked for 09:00 to 10:30. Objective post-upgrade flight validation. Claire read it without blinking. No questions. She didn't need them. She glanced at the torque sealant around the wing root bolts. Different colors. Some pale blue. Some none at all. Retorqued after inspection or replaced outright either way. Not recorded. Her reputation preceded her. Claire didn't sign off unless she saw it herself. Over the last 6 months, she'd grounded 11 airframes, some for hairline stress on the vertical stabilizer, others for mismatched load data. Everyone had been marked mission ready by the book. She didn't care what the book said. It hadn't won her friends. Command tolerated her because they had to. Her record spoke louder than anyone else's in that hangar. 3 deployments. 17 emergency landings. 4 aircraft recovered under mechanical failure. Pilots didn't like flying with her because she didn't miss anything. Contractors didn't like her because she documented everything. She was the kind of officer who made people double-check their torque specs. Not out of pride. Out of survival. Claire moved along the aircraft's flank, ran her hand over the panel edges. Her fingers detected a slight misalignment near the avionics hatch. Less than a quarter inch, but... She crouched low and eyed the landing gear housing. Someone had swapped a hydraulic fitting. Not the spec one. It would pass casual inspection. Not hers. She stood up, took another sip of coffee. The rest of the hangar kept working, but the energy shifted when she moved. Conversations quieted. Heads turned and turned back. She didn't respond. Never had. At 06:12, she climbed onto the crew ladder, leaned into the cockpit, and examined the instrument panel. Too clean. Dust pattern inconsistent. The attitude indicator had been wiped, but not the surrounding frame. She pressed the battery switch briefly. Systems powered up. The fuel gauge pulsed once, then settled. Slight lag. Internal sensor possibly replaced. Not listed. Claire turned the power back off. Sat still for a moment. A student pilot passing behind her muttered under his breath to another. She heard the word ice. She got that a lot. At 06:19, she stepped back down, closed the canopy, reached into her flight suit and pulled out a small notebook. No phone, no tablet, just pen in hand. She wrote 3 lines, folded the paper once, slid it into the left sleeve pocket. She wasn't documenting suspicion. She was logging data, quietly, systematically. The hangar clock ticked forward to 06:20. Claire didn't need confirmation. She'd already seen what she needed to. She wasn't here to fit in. She was here to find out. At 07:02, the flight line buzzed in the distance, but the air around Hangar Bay 3 felt still. Claire held the folder in one hand, her name printed clean in the top corner. Flight assignment, Aircraft T6 Texan 2, mission code UPGR-CK, designated as post-upgrade, airworthiness confirmation. She didn't smile. The aircraft sat 30 feet away, same profile as any other Texan 2, but too polished. Surfaces gleamed where they shouldn't. Wingtip lighting covers had been refastened recently. She could see the tool marks around the screws too circular, like someone had cleaned up after torquing down a cover plate they didn't want examined. The logbook entries were thin, avionics software upgraded, fuel sensor recalibrated, flight control inspection completed in under 30 minutes. No diagnostics data file attached. She walked slow, eyes scanning for torque seals. On the left main gear strut, the hydraulic line had 2 mismatched clamps. One new, one oxidized. That wasn't from lack of parts. That was a swap made in a hurry. A shadow moved in her periphery. She turned slightly. An airman stood near the wing root, E4 by the stripes. He didn't meet her eyes at first. He looked down at the ground, voice low. "That bird's too clean, ma'am." She said nothing. They signed it off quick, wouldn't hand it to anyone else, just you. Still nothing. Her eyes lingered on him. He didn't flinch, but didn't wait for a response. Walked off like he'd never said it. Claire crouched near the tail section, ran a gloved hand under the stabilizer mount, picked up a flake of dried sealant. Wrong color, not even the right compound. Quick fix, not recorded. She pulled a flashlight from her chest rig, trained the beam along the rivet lines across the underside of the fuselage. 2 rivets looked shaved, surface smoothed. Someone had drilled, patched, painted, then wiped clean like it never happened. Up front, the canopy was open, cockpit vacant, instruments dark. She climbed the ladder 1 step at a time. At the edge, she paused. She scanned the cowling fasteners. Right side latch sat low by 3 millimeters. She reached over, tapped it with her knuckle. Hollow. Someone had accessed that panel within the last 12 hours. Claire dropped into the seat. Her fingers moved over the control panel. Light touch, no rush. She pressed battery power. Systems came alive. MFD flickered once before stabilizing. Fuel gauge held at 72%. Too precise. A full drain and refuel would round to 70 or 75. This was filled in increments. Someone had been exact. Exact in a way that meant covering tracks. She shut everything down. From the cockpit, she could see into the maintenance office. Blinds tilted shut. No motion inside. At 07:09, she reached into her side pocket and pulled out her flight gloves. Black Nomex. Still smelled faintly of hydraulic fluid from the last test flight. She adjusted her harness slowly, locked in the belt, didn't speak. The left aileron trim indicator sat slightly off 0. That wasn't an accident. That was either a calibration error, or someone didn't want to take the time to reset it. She closed the canopy with one deliberate motion. The sound echoed through the bay like a door being sealed. Claire settled into the seat, eyes forward, systems quiet, her mind already past the hangar. She hadn't said a word. She didn't need to. At 0907, the nose wheel left the runway. Claire eased the stick back, keeping her climb shallow. Wind cross-fed from the west. She adjusted trim, noted the twitch in the left aileron. Not enough to report. Enough to remember. Altitude 800 feet. Engine response normal. She watched the torque reading settle at 83%. Airspeed steady. Gauges clean. At 200 feet. The panel glitched. Fuel gauge blinked. Voltage display flashed 0. Then snapped back. 1 second. She didn't touch it. At 900 feet, the caution lights bloomed. Hydraulic pressure low. Right alternator offline. In rapid succession, 3 more lights joined. Prop overspeed. Bus 1 failure. Secondary gyro warning. She reached left. Flipped the override. Central control disengaged. Backup systems engaged manually. The panel fought her. Half the indicators froze. The aircraft began to shudder. She adjusted throttle and pitched slightly nose down to stabilize. Still no voice. Still no panic. Her fingers moved like memory. At 300 feet, the artificial horizon rotated. Once. Then again. She ignored it. Claire kept her eyes outside. Horizon real. Wingline matched terrain angle. The instability wasn't aerodynamic. It was internal, fed by bad data. She turned off the MFD entirely. Cabin temp dropped fast. Airflow duct probably disconnected. She didn't flinch. At 2,700 feet, a burning smell touched her nose. Not oil, not fuel. Circuit board insulation. Hot wire. Wrong contact. She reached behind her seat, pulled a small inspection mirror on a telescoping rod. Angled it toward the rear avionics bay. Wires twisted tight. Yellow stripe to green core. That wasn't spec. That was deliberate. She tapped her headset mic once. Flight log. Test aircraft 652. Multiple system faults in sequence. Gauge feedback inverted. Smell of burning insulation. Suspect reversed polarity in secondary harness. Logging time 0911. That was all. She banked shallow right. Altitude 3,000 feet. No safe zone nearby. Closest strip was back at base. She didn't call for help. The engine coughed once. Then again. She throttled back. RPM surged despite input. Claire cut throttle to idle. Feathered prop manually. She reached left. Pulled the red handle for fuel. Shut off. One motion. Smooth. Engine died. She reset attitude. Calculated distance. Wind at 3 knots. Enough glide margin. No hesitation. Auto-rotation sequence initiated. She trimmed nose down. Airspeed steady at 130 knots. Glide angle precise. She scanned the horizon. Picked a clear approach path. Field 3 clicks northeast. Dirt surface. Slight grade. No obstructions. At 200 feet, she made the turn. Still no voice. No chatter. Just flight. At 400 feet, she adjusted flare. Control surfaces responded. Ailerons stable. No further anomalies. She touched down at zone 916. Gear held. Bounce minimal. Nose dropped gently as speed bled away. The aircraft rolled 10 meters, then stopped. Claire cut all power. Sat still. Cabin quiet. She opened the canopy with one motion, climbed down, walked 4 paces, looked back once. Her jaw clenched. No anger, just confirmation. Something wasn't wrong. It had been made wrong. She landed at 0916. By 0938, the aircraft was towed back into Bay 3. Claire stood by the wing while 2 crew chiefs did a surface walk. Neither met her eye. The inspection checklist stayed in its pouch. No clipboards, no questions. At 0952, she stepped into the command office expecting the standard debrief. A legal pad sat empty on the desk. No recorder. No pen. Colonel Wexler nodded once, kept his arms folded. You're cleared for the rest of the day. We'll handle documentation internally. She didn't move. Waited 4 seconds. No one else entered. The silence wasn't unfamiliar, just louder than usual. At 10:11, she walked out without a signature. Protocol breached. No investigation initiated. No request for her headset log. No one asked what went wrong. At 22:07, she was still awake. Her quarters were dark. 2 cups of coffee had gone cold. She sat on the edge of the bunk, boots still on, sleeves rolled. The silence didn't settle. It pushed. At 22:48, she signed out of the barracks without stating a destination. Base protocol didn't require disclosure after hours for officers with clearance. The hangar was locked. She bypassed the door with her security key. No lights. She preferred it that way. Bay 3 sat quiet. Aircraft 652 had not been moved. She stepped close. Her gloved hand moved across the panel lines with silent precision. Under the tail, a small maintenance hatch was secured with 3 bolts. 2 showed standard wear. The third had fresh scrape patterns. Not original. She removed all 3 with a pocket wrench. Slowly. No echo. The panel cover dropped into her hand. Behind it, a relay mount and wiring cluster. She reached for her flashlight. Narrow beam, traced each lead. A central circuit board sat in the anchor bracket. She tilted the beam. The part number stamped in matte black, XQ9073. Her breath paused. She'd seen the recall bulletin. 18 months prior, wiring flaw, tolerances degraded under heat, internal short potential above 190 degrees Celsius, known cause of in-flight power failure. Every board was supposed to be pulled and destroyed. This one was still live, still mounted, and not documented. She photographed it twice, 1 angle wide, 1 tight on the number. At 23:12, she resecured the panel. Backed away without a word. At 23:45, someone knocked once on the back entry to her quarters. Not protocol, just knuckles on metal. She opened the door halfway. Tech Sergeant Nolan stood outside. Black ball cap, civilian jacket, nothing in his hands. He nodded once and turned. At CU003, she opened the manila envelope he'd left by the footlocker. Maintenance logs. Printed, not digital. Some highlighted, others scratched out. She spread them across the floor. 5 documents. All for aircraft 652. One log showed a 3-hour inspection signed off in 26 minutes. Another had identical initials for 2 different sections. Same handwriting. Same pen. Different timestamps. She picked up one sheet and held it against the window light. 2 signatures layered. The original name scrubbed out beneath a false one. One record showed an electrical inspection signed by a tech on a day he hadn't been on base. She checked against the duty roster. The dates didn't align. At CU047, she opened a second folder. Transfer forms. Equipment requisition. One entry stood out. A bulk shipment of XQ9073s received 4 months after the recall. No destruction certificate. No waiver. Just an acceptance log and a supply code marked expedited. At 01:15, she sat back. Her eyes scanned the pile one more time. She didn't reach for a phone, didn't make notes. She didn't need proof anymore. She had it. What she needed now was timing. At 01:33, she powered on her laptop. No login from base network, just offline mapping. She overlaid every maintenance record she'd reviewed from the last 6 months. 7 aircraft, all signed off by the same pair of inspectors. 4 of those planes had been down for unexplained faults. 2 had required emergency landings. 1 pilot had broken both legs. None had resulted in formal investigations. She moved back to the paper trail. Each discrepancy layered on the next. A pattern. Not sloppy. Intentional. Quick signs. Shortcuts. covered up beneath familiar names. It wasn't just one bad part. It was a system, protected by routine, masked by familiarity, hidden under the expectation that nobody asked twice. At 02:19 she stood, walked to the mirror, looked once at herself. Uniform jacket still unzipped, her flight badge half lit by the lamplight. The room smelled of static and paper ink. Outside, the base was quiet. No guards passed. No radio chatter. She turned off the lamp. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The board had been set, and someone was going to lose. At 07:03 the next morning, a single request form landed on the operations officer's desk. Flight authorization. T6 Texan 2. Tail number 652. Requested by Major Claire Donovan. Destination local pattern. Purpose demonstration flight. Under observers. She had listed 3 names from Headquarters Safety Command, 2 engineers from the aircraft's manufacturer, 1 representative from Air Education and Training Command Logistics. Attached was a secondary memo. Hand-delivered. 1 sentence typed. Centered. In bold, observe everything. The chain of command froze, not publicly, not in writing, but beneath the surface. Tension moved like electricity through copper. By 0800, the group commander had been briefed. By 0812, legal counsel had reviewed her authority to request witnesses. She hadn't asked for permission. She had used regulation. At 0920, an email went out, confirming an inspection demo, scheduled for 10:30. No context, no apology. Claire spoke to no one. She spent the hour before flight inside Hangar Bay 3 with 2 security-cleared personnel. Not maintenance, not command staff, just technicians she trusted. One handled audio calibration. The other mounted 2 GoPros, one facing the cockpit panel, one over her left shoulder. She loaded her own USB recorder into the rear panel socket, tucked another in her flight vest. Marked both with the time 09:47. Every action precise. No commentary. She pinned a laminated chart to the bulkhead near the pilot's locker. Failure codes, fault trees, red circles around indicators from her last flight. No title, just data. By 10:12, the air outside was warmer than standard. No wind. The ramp felt still. 10 officers stood behind the flight line barrier. 3 wore visitor badges. 1 carried a notebook but didn't write. Their posture gave them away. Not watching a routine test. Watching something else. None knew what they were about to see. Claire walked across the tarmac alone, helmet under her left arm, vest zipped, no insignia other than her rank and blood type. She climbed into the cockpit without looking at the crowd, strapped in, ran the pre-flight like muscle memory, didn't skip steps, didn't rush. When she keyed the radio, it was only to say one thing: logging video, system audio live, requesting tower clearance for demo departure. The tower acknowledged with standard phrasing, but the tone was off. Too calm, too careful. The ground crew backed away. Claire adjusted trim, nudged the throttle, watched the gauges. She was looking for the moment something blinked. Inside the tower, eyes stayed locked on every display. The aircraft began to taxi at 10:29. Takeoff roll initiated at 10:31. She hadn't told anyone what to expect. No warning, no predictions. She didn't need to. The aircraft's faults would speak for themselves. And this time, someone was going to listen. At 10:31, the aircraft rotated off the tarmac. Nose lifted, gear retracted clean. Claire kept climb rate shallow. Engine hum steady at 84% torque. She didn't speak. Altitude 600 feet, wind 3 knots out of the north. She climbed to pattern height with trim neutral, hands loose on the stick. At 200 feet, the first failure appeared. The left MFD flashed, blinked out, then came back. Voltage dipped. She let it ride. No correction. No reaction. At 1,800 feet, the fuel gauge dropped to 0, then jumped to 76, oscillating in seconds. In the rear avionics bay, the USB recorder captured every system blink. So did the over-shoulder camera. The aircraft shuddered slightly. 1 second, then again. She didn't touch the throttle. Hydraulic pressure warning lit red. Then bus 2 failed. Her voice came through the comms. Flight log. Electrical system failure repeating prior sequence. Fuel sensor fluctuation active. Hydraulic instability confirmed. Request all observers confirm gauge anomalies. Copy silence on the ground line. Then a single voice from tower. Copy. Visual confirmation of warning indicators. Continue as planned. At 2,400 feet, the right alternator failed. A flutter in the stick. A roll left. Claire let it drift. For 4 more seconds she held course, then gradually corrected. No sharp inputs, just control. Behind the hangars, the observers watched the live telemetry on a portable monitor. Voltage flux, pressure drop, fuel instability. Every failure logged in real time. At 2,800 feet, the burning smell returned. She keyed the mic again. Visual confirmation of overheating relay. Source consistent with known XQ9073 fault profile. Smoke trace present. Avionics bay venting required. The engineers on the ground looked at each other. Claire began her descent. Still no panic. She called the maneuver. Entering emergency auto-rotation. Demonstration only. No actual failure of control authority. At 2,200 feet, she banked left. Turn coordinated. Descent angle locked. Rotor RPM stayed steady. At 1,100 feet, she began her flare. Controlled. Measured. Right hand adjusting trim while the left steadied the yoke. At 400 feet, gear extended. Touchdown at 10:41. Smooth. No bounce. No skid. The aircraft rolled 40 feet and stopped. Engines idled. Gauges still blinking red. She shut it all down. Opened the canopy. Unstrapped. Climbed out. Walked 5 steps forward. Turned back. Every camera still rolling. Every failure frozen on every screen. Claire pulled the memory cards herself. Walked them across the ramp. No words. Just handed them over. No one spoke. The aircraft hadn't just malfunctioned. It had revealed everything. At 11:12, Claire laid out her report on a folding table near the edge of the runway. No projection screen. No preamble. Just 3 hard cases unlatched in front of the flight observers. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't ask for attention. They came closer anyway. First were the photographs. 24 printed on matte stock. Each labeled. Each numbered. All taken by her hand. Time-stamped. Close-ups of reversed polarity wiring. Bolt head scarring inconsistent with torque spec. Burn traces on circuit boards. All tied to tail number 652. She pointed once. That's the XQ9073, recalled last year, installed in your demo aircraft 3 weeks ago. No reaction, just silence. Then came the records. Claire handed them across in sequence. Each sheet traced to a different aircraft in the squadron. 7 planes. All maintained under the same contract. All showed manipulated inspection times, fabricated sign-offs, mechanical approvals filed on days when crews weren't present. Third were the requisitions. She flipped open a folder with 5 forms. All sourced from Vortex Aerosystems. Identical equipment lines. Same faulty component listed under different supply codes. The last page was a delivery manifest. It showed a shipment of electrical boards rerouted to this base. Delivered 2 months after their official delisting by the Air Force Material Command. Claire turned the page slowly. No one interrupted. The observers stood with arms folded. The group commander leaned slightly forward, eyes unmoving. The engineers looked down. One stepped back. Claire said nothing more. The numbers spoke. So did the timestamps, the photographs. The signatures several forged, others suspiciously duplicated. She didn't accuse. She didn't speculate. She just connected dots and let the picture form. At 11:38, the OSI investigator on site asked for copies. She handed them over, without comment. By 13:20, Air Force Legal Operations Command had been notified. By 14:05, the base commander received an official request for staff interviews. By 14:12, 3 non-commissioned maintenance personnel were relieved of duty, pending review. At 15:46, the contract manager for Vortex was escorted from the admin wing. Quiet. No cuffs. Just eyes watching. The Air Force Inspector General's office opened a formal investigation at 16:33. The base shifted. You could feel it. Conversations thinned. Laughter vanished. Orders got crisper. Doors that never closed were suddenly locked. Files moved to secure servers. Command staff scheduled meetings at odd hours. The systems hadn't failed. They'd been bypassed. Claire wasn't in those meetings. She stayed on the flight line, sorting, logging, turning over every piece of what they'd tried to bury. By the end of the week, her data matched more than a dozen aircraft. Same contractor, same timeline, same forged entries. She found payments too, small ones, tracked through base financial systems. Bonuses signed out to maintenance supervisors 3 days after deliveries from Vortex. All of it legal on the surface, but stacked. The trail became undeniable. At 09:03 the following Monday, Colonel Wexler called a formation in the hangar. No announcement, no award, just a list of suspensions. 12 names, 1 officer, the rest enlisted, all connected to equipment routing and sign-off protocols. At 10:22, 2 OSI agents boarded a C-21A headed for Maxwell, briefcases in hand. Inside, Claire's report. Across the next month, the pattern repeated at 2 other bases. Similar failures. Same contractor, different aircraft, same part number. By mid-quarter, Vortex Aerosystems had its DLA contract suspended. $48 million of pending procurement halted. No one cheered. There was nothing to celebrate. Claire received no commendation. She didn't ask for one. She submitted an updated technical advisory to the Air Education and Training Command. 22 pages. All data. No names. She signed it with just her rank. By 17:44, that evening, the advisory was forwarded to Air Force Materiel Command for national distribution. Inside the break rooms and briefing rooms of the base, airmen whispered her name, not with awe, with caution, like something that couldn't be ignored. She had turned the system in on itself, not with fury, with facts. The letter came on a Tuesday. Claire opened it without ceremony. An official commendation? A promotion offer? Lieutenant Colonel? Assignment to the Pentagon? AETC Division. She folded it once and placed it back in the envelope. At 13:08, she walked the form down to personnel. Declined. No speech. No reason offered. Just her signature and a steady hand. At 14:00, she submitted a new request. Reassignment, flight instructor, base training squadron. No special consideration. No back channel. 3 weeks later, she moved into a smaller office behind the simulator building. No nameplate on the door. 1 desk, 1 chair, 1 cabinet. She hung nothing on the walls. She didn't need to. Her first class arrived on a cold morning. 14 second lieutenants, fresh from flight screening. Flight suits clean. Eyes unsure. Claire stood at the front, clipboard in hand. No projector. No welcome slide. She pointed to the panel mounted to the back of the room. A decommissioned electrical bay from a T-6 Texan II. Wires exposed. Connectors labeled. Fault lines marked in red. Then she spoke. Every switch you trust has someone's name on it. She didn't elaborate. She didn't have to. The students looked at the panel, looked at her. Some wrote it down. Others didn't. By the end of the week, They all remembered it. She didn't talk about the investigation, never mentioned the part numbers, never repeated what had happened. What mattered was the procedure, the system, the standard that didn't move for convenience. She drilled systems checks by feel, taught them how to hear what the aircraft didn't say. When they asked about her combat hours, she redirected. When they brought up her name from the article, she changed subjects. The lessons came through her silence. When a cadet tried to cut a checklist step for time, she made him restart from the top. Didn't scold, didn't raise her voice, just watched. Her classes ran 5 minutes long every day, not for extra instruction, for debrief, for questions they didn't know they had. By the end of the semester, none of her students had failed their flight assessments. They called her cold, then they called her right. Instructors began to refer struggling students to her. She didn't volunteer. She didn't refuse. When maintenance techs rotated through the classroom, she added a line to their intro. Your signature is a promise. It doesn't vanish when the aircraft lifts off. They listened, not because she demanded it, because she never asked for it. She never wore the medal they sent her. It stayed in a box at the back of her drawer. Her students never saw it. Her colleagues never asked. But every few months, someone new stopped her in the hallway. A junior officer, a ground crew lead, a logistics specialist. They said they'd heard her story. She always answered the same way. You heard what mattered. Nothing more. Nothing less. By the second year, Claire's name wasn't on a plaque. It was on checklists. Instructors quoted her without citation. Cadets called it Donovan Protocol Unofficial, unwritten, but understood. Every switch, every line item, confirmed twice. No assumptions. No skipped redundancies. In Hangar 2, someone taped a sign above the electrical station. Trust doesn't fix torque. No one claimed to have written it, but everyone left it alone. At the far end of the flight line, a T-6 sat on jacks. Underneath, a crew chief paused during final inspection. She reached for a flashlight and muttered low, Donovan, this one. Just to be sure. It wasn't a command. It was a habit. Instructors added time to engine shutdowns, not to rush students, but to force them to listen, feel the deceleration, catch the slight lurch if trim wasn't neutral. The kind of thing Claire noticed without saying. In the squadron break room, a senior NCO told a story from 2 bases ago. A test pilot who'd flown with reversed polarity, who'd landed safe, who'd never raised her voice. The newer airmen didn't interrupt. They knew how it ended. No citations, just inspections. The contractor changed names. The scandal moved into review cycles and procurement protocols. But Claire's habits stayed where they mattered. On the pre-flight sheets, in the flight line talks, across every shop where someone had learned not to ignore the wrong bolt color or the faint vibration just outside spec. She didn't attend the briefings where her story was referenced. She didn't go to the safety conference named after her report. But one morning, in a hangar, downstate, a tech found a recall part, mislabeled in a new shipment. He flagged it before it was installed, averted a flight delay, avoided a problem no one would have seen. The lieutenant watching asked how he caught it. The tech shrugged, seemed off. I figured, better Donovan it. The lieutenant nodded. No medals had been pinned, but no funerals had been scheduled either. The classroom was quiet after final drills. Outside, the last of the Texan 2s rolled into position under a fading sun. Light cut through the west windows in long bands. Claire stood at the whiteboard, arms folded, watching nothing in particular. The cadets sat still. No shuffling, no questions left, except one. A voice from the back. young, hesitant. What if you had died? The room stayed silent. Claire didn't answer right away. She looked toward the flight line, aircraft silhouettes against the dusk. A lone crew chief checked a tire pressure near the tower. Slow, deliberate, routine. She finally spoke. No hesitation, no change in tone. Then maybe 10 others wouldn't. She turned back to the class, met no eyes, but lost none. One of the cadets shifted in his chair. Another straightened. Not sure why. Claire let the silence settle again, the kind that carried weight. No story followed. No elaboration. Just that. A simple equation. Risk paid forward. And the unspoken truth that not all questions deserved comfort. Later that week, someone wrote the words on a dry erase board in the hangar ready room. Not attributed, not discussed, but no one erased it. At 05:46 the next morning, Claire walked past it without looking. She didn't need to. It wasn't about her. It never had been.